Welcome to the Post-War podcast at Kalmark Studios Bunker, somewhere hidden in Berlin. I'm Pablo Denegri, your host, and today's guest is audiovisual artist and curator Robert Seidel. Robert, thank you very much for being here.
Hello, nice to be here.
Robert, you work with, you can say, computer-assisted animations and drawings, and you also teach about it and so. And actually, one of the reasons I invite you because I want to ask you about was this so-called new painting thing. But I would like to start much before. I would like you to tell us about when did it started for you, let's say, this notion that technology can be also a creative force in a way, or this relation that exists between creation and technology.
Actually, that started quite early on because my father was very much into computers, and I grew up in Eastern Germany.
Mm-hmm.
So this was a place where computers were quite rare.
True.
But luckily he kind of saved money from relatives over many years, and then we bought a Commodore 64.
Nice.
And this was kind of the introduction. There was a computer, and of course there were games, but at a certain point my father showed me how to program, how to use like digital painting tools, and this was kind of the start of a journey, because right from the beginning I felt when drawing on paper there's always a decision that can be reversed only with a certain energy or loss in quality. And with the computer I could save the file and open it again, and I was really fascinated by this power to create but never settle on something.
Yeah.
And that was really the right from being, I don't know, like 8, 9, whatever.
Nice. It's very interesting because there's for sure a connection on the kind of toys we play with when we are kids, and if we are lucky enough, what we end up doing as grown-ups or being interested in, and so. And by this time, you are telling having a computer or even having a TV maybe it was a rare thing in some places. So was a lot of this something new feeling, let's say. There was a novelty feeling, and the images also were new, how they looked and the sounds, how they sounded.
Mm-hmm.
And there was like an eruption. This is pre-internet, let's say, pre-massification of computers era. In contrast to the surroundings, like computer aesthetics in a way, were like looked like something completely new or radically new, and this is what I guess was so fascinating about it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the thing was, because growing up in a place where these things were very rare, they had also a different value, and also. For example, something like literature about computers or specific games, there was always a big delay. And of course, also, we just saw the highlights happening. So there wasn't this constant flow, which is even stronger today, that you have new games every day, new things all the time, but you often were forced or maybe driven to do something by yourself and your own, and there was a strange culture that doesn't exist anymore with this reduced availability.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, I remember going to friends, and then there were all kids, and they were playing and trading cassettes and all these things that made the computer something magical. And I think to a large degree this is lost these days, because kids grow up with a computer, with a tablet, with a phone,
It's like everything's there already.
Yeah, it's there, and often because there's kind of this everyday feeling about it, you don't think how this was made, how did it kind of, who created it, how many people were responsible, and it's, of course, that's nothing that is kind of essential to create something interesting with the computer, but it feels very different over the 30 years more than 30 years that I'm using a computer to create something.
Yeah, there's my brother told me about these times where you would hack a video game by synchronizing a specific frequency and recording into a tape cassette, and I was like, "Wow, this is totally like." There's something very phantasmagoric about these technologies. You know, they have inheritance from like war-developed technologies. They have in its origin of production so many connotations in a way. You know. And by this time, at least, I was all fascinated with TVs, like cathodic tube TVs, and so I remember still when people I know had TVs in black and white.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we had black and white TVs until the wall came down, because a color TV, for example, was costing thousands of mark.
Yeah.
And you couldn't buy it simply, you had to wait for it. And it was, I mean, I remember people having it, but it was always, it was too far away from thinking about such luxury goods.
It made me think what you tell me about like how it changed with nowadays those times regarding the restriction of the accessibility to the information, not only to the technology itself, but to shared information, networked information on how to use this and share this knowledge in a way. That kind of had a certain mystic about it, because some people that could only get the technology but not the information on how to use it, they will just learn from scratch, and this constraint in a way had a lot of power, because it drove people to really work on finding this information and the stuff and developing this knowledge in a way. And then on you, I don't know if you studied film, but you ended up being interested in moving image, let's say.
Yeah, I began studying biology.
Right. You started with science, let's say.
Yeah.
Direction.
I mean, the thing about biology was that I was very much interested in forms and shapes of nature. And luckily, I had student jobs, for example, reconstructing skeletons of animals and these things. So there was already a big part of my...
Where was this job? Sorry.
It's at
in the Museum of Natural Science? Or?
Yeah, no. I studied biology in Jena, my hometown where I grew up in Thuringia.
Yeah.
And the Department of Zoology also has a museum, the Philetic Museum.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a large collection, and it was founded by Ernst Haeckel, who's very famous for these drawings of Radiolaria and Medusa.
Wow, I love these drawings.
Yeah, and he's not very present in my hometown, but he's present, so I knew all these things, and I was thinking, if there's a way to study biology in this time, how much of an influence technology will have. And luckily I could do student jobs in that way, but on the other hand, I've always felt that the world is already very kind of taken apart. We know a lot of things about it. It's not like the times of Ernst Haeckel, where he could go and bring back like hundreds of drawings of animals not a single person has seen before.
Just going to the Amazonas, for example.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, maybe there it's still possible, but this kind of potential of finding something unknown is
The
very
unknown,
reduced.
no, was like bigger, you know.
The unknown was much bigger, and I think because sciences, natural sciences these days are so refined and very focused, you end up doing research on this specific bone structure within this specific type of animals, or you're researching just the connection of a biochemical substance with the I don't know, neural system.
Wow.
and it felt really like I don't want to be trapped in this world that is getting small, or not this world, but this little tiny portion of the world that gets smaller and smaller with each year of research. And then I switched to study media at the Bauhaus University in Weimar, which is 30 kilometers away. And that opened kind of a different world, but still I'm very kind of happy about this little excursion into biology and science and how things are.
But were you interested into film before? Because you ended up nowadays you curate or you program video exhibitions also, and I was wondering if you already were interested in film. I have a background in film also. I studied film before arts and communication. And I briefly saw there's something I think still now in Bethanien, or this is older, that has, I just saw it briefly, but some Kwai brothers, for example, film, which is part of history of film animation in Norway. So I was wondering if this was an early interest from you, or this came after you started media design.
No, I was interested in film. I was always drawn to kind of fantasy, science fiction films that were larger than life and also had a lot of effects and puppets and miniatures and all these things that made or created a world that was not real in a way. And I remember having books about film, but always from this perspective of effects. And I didn't know back then that film also can be art, or that there is kind of a tradition that there are art films and experimental films. But I always felt drawn to the abstract and the surreal and the unusual. And
I guess in the Bauhaus you discovered the Fluxus movement.
I would love to say it was the case, but interestingly, I had an exchange semester in Great Britain for a semester, half a year, and they had a really good library on all the classics like Swankmajer, Brothers Quay, Len Lyle, Fischinger, all these people, and also Bauhaus-based artists like Mohoy Notch.
And maybe surrealists from the beginning of the 20th century.
Yeah, they had kind of a large library of VHS tapes, and I was like really blown away.
I can imagine, discovering all together is like...
But the strange thing is that the Bauhaus at this point wasn't really communicating about the traditions they developed like 80 years before that. So I had to go to England to explore.
That's funny in a way.
Yeah, but it's also, I wonder what would have happened if I wouldn't have gone there. Because while being in Germany, I created one abstract animation or semi-abstract animation with 3D tools.
Mm-hmm.
And then going to Great Britain, I opened up my practice and used paintings and drawings also in my films. So there was a shift that wasn't kind of part of my expectations studying media design.
It's interesting, yeah. I like this kind of diversions in art history, like the very specific ones that are not maybe the most popular ones, but they are very rich in all the relations they had with the vanguards along the 20th century, especially. I think Stan Brakhage was from Fluxus, or was related to Fluxus, and I really love. He has these hand-painted film works that he calls songs, I think, because they have no sound. So like the movement of the colors and the thing with. And I was wondering. Because from the times of the Commodore to now, there was a huge change into which computer-generated images can dialogue or mimic in a way or relate to these like fluent, organic, analog movements. Mm-hmm. In these films from Stan Brakhage, they are hand-painted in a way. But there are a lot of similarities or a lot of feelings to some of your works that I noticed that are completely computer created.
Yeah, I think, I really love the work of Brakhage and all kind of these early explorations of images. But in my own work, I was always drawn to something that is, or mostly drawn to something that is very slow and has a slow progress and is kind of stable over time. And Brakhage, because he was drawing on the film stripes, or he was gluing like moth pieces on it and really creating almost a sculpture that was running through the projector. Each frame was kind of singular and was introducing a completely shift in the image composition. And I always looked for something where the image before and after had a relationship. Mm-hmm. And this kind of understanding of the image and the possibilities of the computer helped me to appreciate these classics even more. And just to come back briefly to because you mentioned it, that I'm curating, I'm using the possibilities of curation of exhibitions or screenings just to show the diversity of the moving image, from being purely abstract, from being distorted, from being almost invisible. And I think because, the moving image is very normal these days. Everyone can make a quick video on the phone and maybe even use some kind of filter to create an abstract image just in a second. I think these connections weren't that established back when I started to do work, and the curation, but I still feel the curation is important to show things, because you mentioned the brothers Quay. I was even lucky to meet them, to be in their studio.
Nice.
So it's always also helpful if you curate something to get a better understanding of the artist, of the situation it was constructed, and I feel we all need to be open to things from the past to also create something for the future, because I notice there are a lot of artists that are kind of assimilating styles of the moment, but I think the past holds a lot of things that haven't been fully explored yet, and maybe the curation is a key for me to also find things that are still worth kind of revisiting and reworking.
Definitely, it's a whole separate practice, no? And it has this kind of social service value in a way, or cultural service value. You were lucky to have a father that got you a Commodore 64 in the East Germany, but I was lucky to have an older brother who is a video nerd and also experimental film historian in a way, from Argentina. So I had early access to a lot of weird VHS when I was a kid, and even animes that were very good, animes from the end of the 90s that were impossible to get. And he was programming in a cultural center this series of video art. And so I guess I was really lucky in a way. I also don't know if I wouldn't have touched with this content, if I would be interested in it, or I would kind of understand it, but there's definitely, it feels different right now, like you said before, in like internet era, digital era, everything seems that it's there. And the idea of the origin of its construction, the origin of the technology that would make this kind of image in a way, the analogic one, is kind of lost this reference. And in this, talking about the importance of digging and exposing and learning about this stuff, in this podcast we have a lot of VJs, actually of pioneer VJs, and one friend of mine, Martin Borini, kind of specialized also in this effects, kind of these digital effects we were using at the beginning of the 2000s for making live visuals. They were mimicking these visual synthesizers, from like the 70s and 80s and so, and the origin of this kind of aesthetic in a way. And it's a world in itself, and you really learn to appreciate and to value much more, let's say, when you have this urge to learn about its origins, right? But it's difficult, I don't know, for newer generations or two newer generations, you are a teacher also, is it more difficult to communicate this, like the importance of appreciating, let's say, the original machine, that made this aesthetic first time possible?
I don't know. I mean, talking about a younger generation in general is impossible. The thing I notice sometimes is that because I wasn't studying art, I was studying media design, which is something quite different. And when visiting universities and giving talks, I often feel that the younger generation, because they have seen a lot of things, they always kind of, or not always, they often have a vision what they want to do in a way, but creating abstract work without kind of a specific purpose is something they sometimes can't think of. They always, often I get the question more or less if this is kind of a hobby and if I do other projects and
like with music in a way, or
it's really strange that they often want to work in an agency or they want to do something for feature films. They always have kind of this bigger vision how images and film should be created. And because I studied not studying film and not studying art, I was kind of not sure where to go, and still I'm not fully decided which path I would take. And yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of the pressure that is put on the younger generation, all these things, just leads towards creating something that can be a proper job. And yeah, that's surprising to me. But overall, I mean, I know people in the arts and also in design that create so crazy things still, and I think there's no limit. But yeah.
But it's interesting because even though you didn't study fine arts, and maybe it has to do with this something that you feel that is lacking to some of your students' vision in a way, you have a very rigorous conceptual framework in each one of your works that specifically dialogue with art history and sometimes specifically with music history or classical traditional music history or with painting itself. How come, in a way, since you don't have this fine arts, that you can, let's say, come in a way from a tangent and interpolate or confront art history or history of painting in a way with a computer?
That simply has to do, of course, I've been going to museums, and when studying, I used every chance. If I was presenting a film at a festival, I was going to museums and, of course, the festivals and seeing a lot of things. And as I mentioned earlier, in even the earliest days of computer, I liked the fact that I could undo things and redo things and reload things. And when doing drawings and when doing paintings, which I did to a certain extent, I always had this feeling of going too far, of going in the wrong direction. But I liked the fluidity and the organic aspect of layering colors, of shaping forms. And I felt the computer offers kind of both things, because there's a big misconception or misunderstanding of the computer that people think, oh, things that are created with the computer have to look this way and have to look that way. And that's not true, just because the tools have a certain approach of creating an image with polygons and with textures and with specific render options. It doesn't mean you either have to use them to create something naturalistic, or you have to use them in the way they were intended to be used. And early on, I was surprised that these things that are related to painting and also to sculpture, how to sculpt something, to add something to
you
an
also
object.
you also do 3D objects and virtual sculptures.
Yeah, I mean, these are kind of side products and can become an artwork in itself. But all these things, all these transformations from the virtual into the real and back, they all are in the possibilities of the computer. And you just have to find your ways, which are often quite technical, to create that bridge. And from the process of painting, I often feel, and you often also see it, if there's a portrait of a painter on TV or in an art magazine, you always see them like doing crazy movements and being like energetic and concentrated and all these things. And I also think this is often more interesting and more powerful than the final result. And I was looking for ways to create movies or installations that capture these moments of these expressive gestures and this energy. And
right, going back a bit to what I was saying, what I was saying before, at the times of the Commodore, it was limited what a computer could create talking about image creation, right? But nowadays, they're really intrinsic in the process of images, productions in general. It's like when they talk about electronic music. When I was growing up, there was this taboo that electronic music was totally separated from music, or commercial music, and actually, technically, they were made or at some point of the process with the same tools, even if it was mixing or mastering or whatever, or processing. So they're part of the same history in a way. And nowadays, computer can really be part of a process that continues a semi-organic or analog texture or movement. And this is where you are working on in a way, right? Like in this possibility of computing, let's say, to be at the level of being included in a process of creation of images that are representing, in a way, I don't like that word a lot, but organic nature from the analog world, so to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, of course, there's simulations. You can use filters to simulate VHS tape and all these things, but
it's not the same, I have to say.
Yeah, no, of course.
No VHS plugin works as a real thing.
Of course, but as long as people haven't seen the original VHS and have explored it by themselves, it's kind of this mimicry and simulation that is kind of enough for a lot of people. I see the point, but the interesting thing could happen if people using this plugin to create something that has a bit of a kind of skeleton of an VHS aesthetics and then build on top of it. And I think that's the power. And I think in music, there's a lot of more of these things. You can download any big orchestra of the world and use this specific, flute from this specific movie, and then still you can sculpt it with millions of plugins and techniques and record it on tape and all these things. But I think in creating images, this is not a very common thing because it's still much slower to render something and to re-render and to recapture. I think
the process is not so direct like what you say with the painting or Jackson Pollock dripping like the...
No. You always have kind of a lot of delay and technical issues, and you can work your way through it, but it's less spontaneous and it's also less forgiving in a way, because some things you can't transform easily.
Yeah, and it's beyond the limitations of the timings of the process of the human body in a way, right? Before it was directly the hand and the body against the canvas, or how much or how long the body could take, or this imprint in a way. And this, I think some say co-creation, let's say, with the computing mechanism, it requires a different kind of timing of processes that are not immediately related to the human body in a way, and goes into what's called the post-human, let's say, sphere. The painting was already once it freed itself from representation. We studied at least at university when photography came, because photography could represent reality much. It was already a proof of reality by definition, let's say, by the mechanism itself. It was this warranty, right? So it was the first instance of painting, let's say, liberation. Then with digital photography, photography was not anymore a proof of a reality that was necessarily there, because it could be faked in a way. You're talking in the description of one of your works, I don't remember which one right now, but you talk also about some kind of new independence, a new liberation of painting in a non-steady, non-static way, more like a flux or something in movement, in an organic movement in a way. What's that about?
That comes back to that idea that I wanted to create or capture, either capture or maybe reimagine the process of a painting, like the different layers coming together. And I think you're talking about sfumato.
Sfumato. Is that the one I saw in the context of CTM? Yeah.
There was simply the idea that if you put this idea into a film, you see these transformations and they have a certain kind of velocity and speed, and you maybe understand what things are hitting or aiming for, but it loses this timeless quality of a painting. And with sfumato, I wanted to go back to this and have a moving image that is so slowed down that it's almost static. And I wanted, it was specifically created for an exhibition scenery or setup where you have this work and you walk through the exhibition and you come back and
I saw the film
different.
version. The original version is a multi-channel video installation.
Yeah. And this kind of things that are not obvious in the first place, you could think it's just a slide on the wall, and then you walk through the exhibition and it has changed, and it makes you think, oh, did I miss something? And it's just this idea of sharpening the senses, because we often think if we look at something, because we look at millions of images a day, we understand it quite quickly. And this was just kind of a way to show, oh, maybe a film can be also an almost static image and become a painting again. And the most confusing thing about showing that work is that people come up to me and say, oh, I really like your work. Could you maybe do paintings of the different things?
So I can buy an object.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
And that's really kind of exactly the thing I didn't want to achieve. But in the end, the idea of buying a painting and collecting a painting is so strong, embedded in our understanding of art, that even trying to do something different results in wanting to buy a painting. Yeah,
it's amazing. This is very entangled with the origins of modern art as we know it, all this marketization kind of aspect, and also that's why the time-based art are one of the most obscure or not so commercial, let's say, right? Because they escape this more materialistic capitalist state. But this is also changing, right? Or some say they are changing with with the NFTs, and I don't know what you think about that, but we don't have to address it.
I mean, I like the idea that people buy or are willing to pay for digital art, for kind of little animation loops, for things that nobody would have even thought about some years ago of buying or collecting. But I feel because of this gold rush situation that is clearly over now, but still it was kind of crazy.
True.
That most of the things being sold were just really terrible illustrations and really terrible ideas of a variation of a stupid ape or of these CryptoPunks and all these things that have, in my opinion, nothing to do with kind of art. I feel that it's a strange world, and I know people and I have friends that sold NFTs and that made kind of took a good portion out of this. But I feel that it's even more crazy than the commercial gallery scene in the sense what people were just kind of putting out.
Actually, I'm glad that I addressed that because I was thinking about it, reading some description from your works about your objective being, or your work also about kind of trying to get this deconstruction of the notion of beauty in a way. But it has a very heavy conceptual framework, and you are very seriously always trying to, let's say, honor this quest. With NFT visual realm, obviously, it's not that I'm saying that, the beauty aspect of it, either subjective or objective, plays no role whatsoever, or it seems that it doesn't. And so that's what I was wondering, what were your ideas about it, right? Because it seems like a completely different approach, in a way, to digital imaginary.
Yeah, I mean, my approach of beauty is coming from that idea of having something that feels ephemeral, that feels kind of in a constant movement and creates this very almost melancholic moment where you see something and feel that the thing you're looking at changes and it changes something in you. So it's this idea of a sublime moment and having the possibility to fill an abstract structure with your own thoughts. And I feel NFTs are also kind of, a lot of them address beauty, but more
not so
like
much
in a
emotion.
Yeah, exactly, more in a commercial way of oh, that's a fantastic car and that's a beautiful girl and that's funny animals, and it's a very kind of shallow thing, and it's very optimized to create kind of an impact within a split second, but after that a lot of things are just feeling like losing and fading out. And I don't know if there's a chance that this NFT idea really create something of an value and a financial system that helps artists to create over a long run, and also opens a more diverse approach. Of course, you can get loads of things, but the focus is always on the Beeple stuff that sells for 60-something millions, and it feels like
the superlative, right? That has so much to do with capitalism, bigger, more
louder,
expensive,
more flashy. And
I will ask you in a bit, if not in the NFT realm, where do you project that this could go? Let's say the realm of digital images or art. But I would like to address this emotion production aspect of your work, because you just said some emotions that I already thought about when I was watching, I think, Sfumato, thinking about the non-figurative kind of statement, or let's say in quest. It's always kind of dialoguing with figuratism and playing with our brains in a way. I guess I don't know if it's the AI generative part, or I know some AI generated images work with programs that kind of the description of an image of a photo, and then they try to reproduce an image, but all the time changing things like that. But they do produce emotions, let's say, for a human being that it's entering this non-figurative or transfigurative, I don't know how to call it, realm. And it does produce a lot of emotions. I wrote, for example, solemnity, contemplation, tension, intrigue. A lot of this maybe also has to do with how the music works. You also compose the music in a way. Sometimes, in this case, in Sfumato, it's kind of in the direction of electroacoustics, in a way, if you could say. Mm-hmm. So this has already a charge of feelings that are already typified in a way, like the violin, the string instruments, and so. But they are like also existing this weird intersection with what we know as figurative work, but also as abstract work. And I was wondering if your final objective was to produce emotions like for the human spectator, or if you are also thinking beyond, like this co-creation thing, this emotional thing, you think it goes beyond? I'm not going to ask if the computer has emotions, but what's your limit there? I mean, how far do you think about it? You think it ends with the human spectator that is experienced? Maybe I got to metaphysics, but
no, I mean, Sfumato has nothing to do with all these AI processes. That's really like constructed and a mixture of filmed drawings, and then
it started from analog painting sketches, and you process them with the do-it-yourself synthesizer, I guess.
Yeah, some kind of touch designer patches that are kind of course, using different approaches, and then you sculpt the thing over time. But more recent work, Hysteresis, I don't know if I sent you the link.
I don't know.
Okay. Probably not, but this one is the one that really uses AI in a way to...
yeah, check it out, your web.
Okay.
The trailer, I think.
Yeah, it's a trailer, exactly. Because I can send you the film, and it will be presented in 2 months. So,
perfect. In Berlin?
In Berlin, yeah. I mean, it will come to film festivals, but it will be shown in Bethanien on 8th of April. So this is the chance to see it. And
everyone in Berlin.
Yeah. No, I think with this, this film was exactly what you described, that I wanted to see what these GAN-fueled processes are capable
GAN
of.
is the short for this?
It simply means you have kind of a trained system, and you kind of take some structure out of it that kind of goes into a specific direction defined by, in this case, I was using a subset of GAN, which is combined with not speech, language. And so you have the possibility to describe certain things to the GAN, which is then kind of embedded into the image gradually. And I was I was using a similar approach like in Sfumato with these drawings and reprojections. And
it's always transforming in a way.
I think that's an important thing, that you don't just use one line, but also like a feedback loop and reprocessing, because this kind of cuts away specific styles. And in this work, I was also using a dancer, Tsuki, who was, we were improvising, or she was improvising, and I was projecting on her, and I was filming her and reprojecting, and I wanted to create this really strong feedback thing. But in the end, I was using this machine learning thing to wash away certain things that I felt that were too much in the image or missing. And it allowed me to basically change the style of the image within, sometimes even every second. So I think it's really interesting to have this possibility to use a system that was trained on, for example, wiki arts on 100,000 paintings, and then use this knowledge of the AI to say, oh, I want this image to be more, I don't know, fluid and more textured and more this and that, and then gradually put this raw image, which is already very dense, into a new being. And I think at the moment these processes are slow and technically they're not very complicated to use, but the math behind it I don't understand. But still I'm able to make certain changes and kind of get it in the way to work. But I found it very interesting to have this access to, I don't know, at least 600 years of human knowledge of painting, drawing, and to a certain extent sculpture, and to use it to
teach this to the AI, let's say. And how is this process of teaching the AI 600 years of art history?
I mean, you can teach your own things. You can use existing things to reteach it, and the wiki arts model is pre-trained because it would take, I don't know, hundreds of days to train it. But you can download the thing. That's the interesting thing at the moment, and that's also kind of rarely the case before, that in this kind of research of AI, a lot of things are freely available online. And there are people that trained, I don't know, a model on cats or on faces. And you can download this model and then you can use it the way you want. And you can, I don't know, create cats that have human faces and that are painted in the style of, I don't know, like some impressionistic painter.
Right.
And it becomes a strange kind of building block, Lego-like thing where you can combine everything that was trained or that you have trained and build something out of it. And it's really kind of out of control in the way, because nobody will stop you to combine this with that. If it makes sense, you have to find out. And for this movie, I spent also most of the time, I started with a vision, I think this should look kind of almost like a liquid in kind of a vibrating state. And then I looked at the result, and then I reshaped and found new ways, and maybe shifted the complete idea. But overall, because the AI doesn't have a single input, like some parameters, and then you know what's coming out. It has its own mind, well, so to say, and you have to understand it. And sometimes you see, oh, because it was trained on this kind of images, it has a certain bias towards things.
Like human beings.
Yeah, no, it's the first time I feel that using a digital tool is more of a dialogue where you reshape things because you can't predict where it's going. And of course, this has a lot of implications on the use of AI, because I was sitting there and I was like putting in stuff, and I thought, that basically should look this way, and then there was something completely different. And it made me aware that these training sets and all these things that are put into it, you never know what it's actually, or you often don't know what they are doing. I mean, there are people that kind of explore that there's a racistic bias on things that...
Like the Twitter bot from some years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Like a Twitter bot that becomes a racist Twitter bot. Or, I mean, there are a lot of AI approaches that try to read an image, and sometimes they don't recognize a certain skin color as a human. And these things, and you can read about these things, and there are a lot of discussions, but for me as an artist, it was really like surprising that this partner and this dialogue was so...
The co-creator, you mean?
The co-creator was so strange. Obscure. Because sometimes it perfectly did what you thought it would do, and sometimes it was completely a mess.
That's why for some years now already it's assigned an entity, at least in art, let's say this co-creation part, is because there's really an obscure part of the process that you can use artistically, conceptually, and so, but you still don't control. You know, for me, it's very interesting in a way, and has to do with this kind of more neural, or the kind of process that it happens independently in that aspect. And you said you cannot predict where it goes, but as a last question, or questions in a way, I would like to know if you ever imagine where it's going, let's say with quantum computing, let's say with these computers, not needing time for learning, but also being able to produce imaginary movement, you know, like in real time, let's say. Do you think about where could this go, like positive or negative in a way, if it gets out of control, or if you find that it has it could have a bright future?
I mean, just thinking about this possibilities from today to even like 2 years or 5 years, I'm really wondering how certain industries will survive, and how certain specialists will kind of cope with it. Because right now you can generate almost photoreal faces, you can generate all kinds of music, and of course there are things missing, and some things are terrible, kind of aesthetically, but I feel, for example, image synthesis.
But it is becoming indistinguishable from reality.
Yeah, no, it's becoming indistinguishable, and this means simply I have kind of the fear that it will replace a lot of jobs for the people, like the small people that work on film, that add their voice to a commercial, all these things.
Call centers, maybe.
Yeah, call centers, all these things where there's a human voice needed.
A simple interaction of...
even complex ones, even music. I mean, it can happen that musicians, a specific kind of musicians, lose their possibility to work, and that agencies are just kind of hitting some buttons and then wait 3 iterations and then they pick something and they don't need to hire anyone.
There's already a virtual pop artist.
Of course, there are a lot of these
hologram or Instagram, I don't know. Yeah.
There are virtual supermodels and all these things, but I'm in the fear that because the AI can be trained on anything, that every kind of new idea just gets kind of assimilated and will be turned into a product. And I don't know what this means in the end, because there are a lot of artists and of course designers and thing that are living from these small jobs and living from this opportunity. Oh, can you write me a text about my whatever for my upcoming book, or can you write me lyrics for this and that? And if these jobs get automated, just
creative jobs even.
Yeah, creative jobs become automated because there's a lot of research happening. There are billions of dollars put into these startups and companies. And if somebody's kind of just breaking open things, I can see that it will have a dramatic impact on all this lower class creative people. And I feel, I don't know.
That's a huge shift in a way.
Yeah,
because it affects majority of working class population in a way.
Yeah, but working class like call center and service industries, but also creative industries and even things that we can't imagine at the moment. And I feel this will be quite dramatic.
Dystopic approach.
I don't
Terminator,
know.
You know.
Yeah, but in a strange way, there always, or not always, there have been these discussions that automation in car production and all these industries will replace the worker, and they become unemployed, and then the machines take over these productions. And there was this discussion to not to tax also machines. If in your company there's a machine working, there should be a tax that we can pay the unemployed people this machine just kind of created. But I feel that with the perfection coming closer and closer for a lot of these things, that maybe we really should consider it that also these companies need to kind of pay a specific tax to adapt a voice, to adapt the painting style, to adapt this and that. And of course this sounds dystopian, but I also feel just kind of as a last example in this, there's the progress in translating texts has reached so far that one of the translators on the market, I'm using it for most of my translations. Sometimes I write the text
for some languages was better than for others. I can
yeah,
tell
of
you.
course. Yeah, no, totally. But still, it's
sometimes it's
mind-blowing.
spooky good.
And you have sometimes I'm writing a text in English because I have maybe a better way to approach an idea or vocabulary, and then I translate it into German, which is my native language. And often this version is, after refinement and adaptation, of course, is more fluent and easy to digest than the one I would have written in the first place. Because it's kind of It's
It's
knowing
also
millions of
text
books.
copying, text editing in a way.
Yeah, no, totally. But I feel with text, it became very obvious that this is kind of a journey that will cause a lot of change, and I don't know if it will be for good. And of course, it offers artists a lot of possibilities. But I mean, to be honest, even though art is kind of a driving force in some of these fields, in the end, the money will be kind of searched and found in other industries for sure.
Yeah, it's a dire expectation, but a lot of our technocratic history already taught us to expect something in that regard. And obviously, without change in distribution of wealth and social restructure, it will be difficult to not have a dystopic future. And you yourself, as an artist coming next, you told me you will have something in Berlin. You have also, I think I saw on Instagram something you curated in France. Can it be?
No, I'm part of something in
okay.
Paris.
And what's coming next in your artistic production?
Next will be the movie, which luckily will be shown in Berlin in April, but also goes to these festivals in the world, hopefully. If the world doesn't burn down completely.
This is the post-world podcast already, so we are safe.
Yeah, I mean, the machines can do better pictures than us. Why shouldn't we exist anyway? No, I mean, I'm in discussion about different installations and projects, but even though the war is happening, there's also still COVID, and there's still a lot of delays in postponing. So for me at the moment, it's waiting and talking and visiting, and it feels really strange that after so many years I've been working, this Corona time kind of completely dissolved any stability of planning, of
for
thinking,
many,
for almost everyone.
For almost everyone, yeah.
But for me as an artist, I would love to say, oh, I have this big thing, and maybe it happens, but I don't know. And it's really interesting that we are used to talk about something that will be happening. And I still haven't adapted to talk about things that might happen or not.
Yeah,
it's really strange.
It's a process, no? Also with the language to learn how to adapt to the new situations.
It's a language, it's an emotional journey, and it's all this. And but to kind of to give some glimpse into the future of the things I want to do at the moment, apart from like these environmental installations with projections in nature that I did. The next step will be, after the current movie, to create a movie that will be released in the year 2024.
Okay.
Because it will be celebrating the movie Grau, which was my diploma movie at Bauhaus.
Yeah, I saw it.
And it then will be 20 years, and I think it's a good opportunity to put in all the things I've learned over the last 20 years to approach things like two-dimensional animation, 3D animation, AI, all these things, and put it together. Because with Grau, I was using motion capture and 3D scanning, all technology that was quite new back in 2004.
Right.
And now, 20 years later, I want to kind of update the approach of creating painterly organic images with the tools and approaches of the current time. And this is also, I don't know, for the listeners of the podcast, if you're a programmer, if you have some software, if you have an interesting technology and you want to see it used in an artistic way, feel free to contact me, because I think there has been a lot of things that completely changed, and I want this film very, in a very diverse manner of ideas of people supporting it, and that would be the thing that also keeps me maybe looking away from the pandemic and from the war, just to give me a perspective in 2 years to work on something. Because right now it feels often that if you do something, there's a good chance that it won't be shown the way you planned it. And with a film, maybe as a last sentence, for me, film or short films is a beautiful way of putting ideas of image and sound and the time structure into something that can be watched on any device, be projected on walls, in museums, on whatever. And I think even though interaction is interesting and multi-channel is interesting, a film, even over the time of more than 100 years, is still a very powerful way of creating.
It's still something special, right? Moving image.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think it's irreplaceable for now.
Nice. We will leave links for your ongoing stuff and also for your works and projects. Thank you for coming again, and thanks everyone for listening. Bye bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
High five. Yay! If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to give us a like and a comment under the video. If you want to see more, click here, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.